What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Well, we had our final Monday night game of the year. The Detroit Lions and Dan Campbell get revenge in a completely meaningless game. They had nothing to play for. It's whether they won or lost this game didn't affect next week. The 49ers are long gone, but a lot of takeaways. I wasn't going to lead with Purdy because, at one point in time, he was having the game of his life. I think statistically he threw for more yards than he ever had. But that performance in the second half, the turnovers, we gotta acknowledge it because his offseason contract is going to be one of the biggest stories of the year. And obviously the Detroit Lions playing Minnesota. Can they win that game? It's at home. Defense is in shambles. They had a couple big turnovers, and that's going to be the only way they can beat Detroit and win in the playoffs because defensively they can't stop anybody. So we'll dive into this game. Get you quick. This is my flu game. Woke up this morning. I haven't felt this bad. I don't get sick that often in a long time. And I think my Christmas tree was supposed to go to the front yard. So I did that really quick in a sweat, pine needles everywhere, and went back to bed till about 3 in the afternoon. But I almost canceled, and then I realized last Monday Night Football game of the year, 49er, Ricky Pearsall. If Ricky Pearsall can play shot, your boy can play with the sniffles and a little flu. And that's what we're doing, talking some football. But before we dive into the Monday night game, I got to tell you about my friends, my partners, and the official ticketing app of this podcast, Gametime. You want to go to an athletic event, pro, college, you want to go to a concert, you want to go to a comedy show, they got you covered. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app. Create an account. Use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets. Lowest prices guaranteed. First and foremost, I really admire those two teams. No one has anything to play for. The Lions could have rested guys to be ready for next week, given that they're playing Monday night, 3 time zones over, and they have one of the biggest games in franchise history coming up at home. And not only did Dan Campbell not rest anybody, he approached that no different than he will next week. The 49ers have guys making huge money, well-established stars, and they played their ass off. Feels like one of the better Nick Bosa games. Maybe he was up because he's playing, 2 really good tackles. George Kittle is just leaving it all on the. George Kittle's had a fantastic season. Like I said, Pearsall got shot. Megan had the game of his life tonight. Juwan Jennings, Fred Warner. These guys are all flying around. And this is why football dominates. Because no matter what, game matters, game doesn't matter. You get everyone's best effort. And that's definitely a defining attribute of Monday Night Football. We say it all the time. Even as the season goes on, you can get matchups where you have a playoff team and a non-playoff team, and anything can happen. Obviously, the Detroit Lions have a lot of injuries, and they're going to struggle to stop people. But let's start with the 49ers. And let's start with Brock Purdy, because his conversation with his contract, they talked about it tonight. And Troy Aikman has said, as he said for a couple of years now, he likes him. I like Brock Purdy too. But before we even discuss money, let's just discuss his play. He has been a turnover machine in the second half of these games. The Rams, awful turnover, lose the game. The Miami Dolphins, awful turnover, lose the game. Tonight, I don't want to hear, well, what about the defense? He doesn't play defense. He's not stopping them. The 49ers aren't stopping them. It's irrelevant to him. Tonight was all about you cannot turn the ball over. And this was a night, if you don't turn the ball over, you're going to score on every drive. Now, I don't even think the 49ers punted. And the only way the Lions were going to beat you, the only way, well, twofold. The Niners somehow drafted a kicker in the 3rd round, and he's one of the worst kickers we've ever seen. But that's a separate issue. Was if Brock Purdy or offensive players fumbled the ball. No turnovers. And for whatever reason right now, Brock Purdy over the middle of the field is just not a reliable passer.
And I don't know if it's because he can't see things. Even some of the balls he completes oftentimes are erratic. And tonight was tough because that Lions defense, beside a couple players, is a practice squad unit. It's not very good. They are not stopping anybody. And the only way the 49ers were going to lose that game once they got the lead was Purdy handing them the ball. And not only did he do it once, he did it twice. And the first one, airmailed, wasn't even close. I mean, Ricky Pearsall would have had to jump 30 more feet to even touch the ball. And the other one, he just stares down the guy over the middle of the field. And Kirby Joseph picks him off and does the Merton Hanks, which is an awesome dance, by the way. But like when we talk about Brock Purdy's skill set, he clearly has talent. He clearly is a solid player. In the first half, he was slicing and dicing them, had an awesome touchdown run. But like part of his game, he's never going to play like Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson. Decision making is going to have to be a huge part of his game and be like an elite decision maker. When I think Drew Brees, I go, well, he never had the talent of Aaron Rodgers, right? Or the arm of Tom Brady. But decision making was just on point. No one was better, was a master upstairs. And one of the knocks on Purdy coming out, part of the reason he fell to the seventh round wasn't just his physical limitations, is because his last year in college, he was throwing picks nonstop. And you watch him down the stretch, like the Niners, they were 6-9 coming into this game. But like just a couple weeks ago, they were in it with the Rams. And he's just become a turnover machine. And it's a problem. And when we talk about this huge amount of money, like I just think, how could you not be concerned? Honestly, how could you not be concerned? How could you be comfortable giving him this type of money when this is what's going on? Last year, like that's how we got in the Trevor Lawrence situation. Trevor wasn't playing well. Everyone was making excuses. Then they give him money and it was a disaster. Jordan Love, at least he had played well to when they cut him the check. Like part of, if you look at it like a stock, if a stock's up or a stock down, shouldn't a stock be down? I don't give a shit what you did in 2022 or 2023. It's 2025. What happened the last couple months? What the hell was that? It's just, listen, I'm not trying to be some hater because I've never been on that side of the ledger. But when I watched tonight and I watched those two passes that lost them the game, two interceptions led to 14 points, ball game. It's over. Like, I don't, you can be like, well, the defense sucks. Well, yeah, they've sucked for a long time. They're not very good this year. Neither's the Lions. You know who didn't throw the ball to the other team? Jared Goff. You know why? Because if Jared Goff throws picks right now, guess what will happen? The Lions will lose. He can't afford to turn it over. He's got to be perfect. So what was Jared Goff tonight? 25 of 34, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. Honestly, his only stupid play was like a bad sack that ended up, they got 3 points out of it anyway. But like, you have to hang your hat on something if you're Purdy. Same thing with Jared Goff. A huge part of Jared Goff's game, because he's not super mobile, right? And he's actually, it feels like he's throwing the ball with a little more zip now than ever. But it's decision making, really good decision making, especially over the last couple months as their defense has been depleted. I have to rely on you. Obviously, there are going to be some plays. Kyle Shanahan, Ben Johnson, elite coordinators. There are going to be plays where guys are just wide open, hit them in stride, and they both do it with their eyes closed. That's why they're good players. But where Jared Goff, to me, is really separated, like, I'm looking at his game log. Niners, no picks, obviously. The Bears last week, no picks. The Buffalo Bills, no picks. The Packers, 1 pick. The Bears, no picks. Like, he just hasn't been throwing picks because he can't afford to. Because if he does, and honestly, if he does next week, they'll lose. And sometimes, like, this is why if I'm going to pay a quarterback $40, $50 million a year and give $150, $200 million guaranteed, there's going to be a stretch where my defense is in shambles. And we can't stop anybody, especially good offenses. I'm going to need to fucking ride you like, Secretariat. And whether you play like Josh Allen or whether you play like Jared Goff or Purdy, you got to play within yourself but dominate. And you can't be hitting guys in stride like Brock Purdy did today. Like that, I don't know. Anyone making excuse for him tonight should be ashamed and embarrassed. Like that's an enlightening moment. And then he gets, I'm recording this right after the game. He gets injured. I don't know what that was. Keep your fingers crossed it's not that elbow again. Kind of a weird deal. He couldn't grip the ball. Hopefully it's just his hand. But man, Like I just can't get over the interceptions. I don't do especially second half interceptions. And that's what all these down the stretch of Miami, the Rams, tonight, second half interceptions. Doesn't get any worse than that. It really doesn't. So I'm not acting like they're going to kick him to the curb. Tim Kawakami reported tonight that Jed York, who was on the field before the game, told Tim that obviously these guys are coming back. I've never even entertained that story. And Kyle likes Brock, but these have to be moments. Like there was one moment tonight where he threw a pick and Kyle immediately covered his mouth. He's no dummy. Monday Night Football, he knows he gets caught on camera talking a bunch of shit. It would go viral. Like, Kyle, I want to see what you're saying. I'm interested. I want to hear your thoughts because I know I'm going to get your fake thoughts in front of the podium here whenever you talk after the game. But listen, I admire the 49ers being completely out of it and throwing the kitchen sink with all they got, given their injuries and their situation. I mean, they played a game tonight. Their offensive line was the equivalent to the Detroit Lions defensive line. You couldn't point any of these guys out of the lineup. And they're trying, and I appreciate that. But at the end of the day, when you're in a tight game and we're talking, hundreds of millions of dollars being in a contract, like you just can't make those passes. They cannot happen, right? They can't. Not when your contract is in the balance and not expect people to like be all over the map on opinions on it. And on Detroit, like my number one takeaway before Purdy started throwing the interceptions was like, there's just no way they can beat beat the Vikings next week, let alone win playoff games if this is their defense. And it's not their fault. It's not like they have a bad scheme. They just have a million injuries. Their offense is elite. Like it is awesome. They got it all. But if you do not have a defense, you cannot win in football. You can't win in big time college football, and you definitely can't win in the NFL. And given the unit they have, they're kind of screwed. They cannot slow anyone down. I mean, Purdy tonight, who's to me had a pretty meh season, I don't care what statistics you throw at me, had the game of his life in terms of passing yards. And guys were running wild. And the thing in the NFC, obviously Minnesota, you got Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson. The Philadelphia Eagles, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Saquon Barkley. I will see on Goddard's health, but even their backup tight end's good. The Green Bay Packers, if Christian Watson could ever get healthy, they got a million wide receivers and a tight end and Josh Jacobs. So you just look at the NFC, the Rams are probably your easiest bet given that they just got Puka Nacua and a running back. But all these good NFC teams, even Washington, they got a quarterback that can run around. They got a couple wide receivers. They got Terry. It's hard. You got to play defense. And it's sad because I think the Lions, like healthy earlier in the season, like they're winning the Super Bowl. Everyone thought it. Anyone, whether you like the Lions, whether you don't like the Lions, if you just watch football, you went, that's the best team in the league. And this team no longer resembles them. Offensively, it does, but defensively, it does not. So if Dan Campbell can win this game, what a disadvantage it is for the Lions to play multiple time zones on the West Coast, have to fly back. I mean, I'm recording this at 8:30 Pacific Standard Time. So let's say they get to the plane by 10:30-ish, 10:15. They're in the air by 11 Pacific Standard Time. 4.5, 5-hour flight to Detroit. I mean, by the time they're getting there, the sun's coming up. And you only got like Tuesday, usually Monday and Tuesday are game plan days. I would imagine Dan Campbell had Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, and some of his staff really start working on Minnesota today, right at the hotel, because they got to be, one, you're just exhausted after a game. You're only going to have so much energy, even if you pop like 60 milligrams of Adderall and slam some Red Bulls, you only have so much energy, and then it'll catch up to you later in the week. And this is the best game of the weekend by far. I mean, let's face it, the games this weekend kind of suck because there's not really that much on the line. It's not like there's 10 teams in the balance of winning division, not winning division, getting in, not getting in. There's not much going on. In this, I mean, both teams are making the playoffs, but it's the first time I read a headline today. Two teams, or it's like the fourth time in NFL history that two teams over 10 games over 500 will play. Obviously, it has to take a very unique set of circumstances to even get to that point, but it sucks because what Dan Campbell's done, you see that visual during the Monday night game of when, is it Sheila Ford? Is that Martha's daughter? Or maybe it's Martha and Sheila was the mom. I get those confused. Sorry, Detroit Lions fans. I'm not super locked in on the ownership names with your family, but the Ford family, obviously the daughter runs it now. And when she stood by them when they were 1-5 with Dan Campbell, and remember, it was really ugly early on with Jared Goff. what they've become is really awesome. But I think the shitty part, big picture, is like Aaron Glenn, you never know with the defensive coordinator. Like defensive coordinators aren't locks to get a job, though. Like I kind of imagine he'll be the next coach of New Orleans. We'll see on that one, or even the Jets where he played. But it feels like if Ben Johnson is willing to leave this year, which he wasn't last year, like he's gone. So this was your squad, right? It wasn't obviously all your defensive guys are under contract, but you had your coordinators who Ben Johnson's been the coordinator for 3 years and he'd been there 4, and Aaron Glenn's been the coordinator the entire time. And obviously Dan, tonight he goes for it no matter what, but I couldn't fault him tonight of going for some of these. Like it didn't even matter. And even sometimes he kicked field goals. He was just trying to win, which I appreciate. Why? Because winning breeds on winning. You see everything that's coming out of the Indianapolis Colts. I saw a bunch of clips during the Monday night game scrolling my phone. McAfee put out this thing, and on the Colts, basically Shane Steichen was asked, like, did you guys have a problem with people being late? He's like, yeah, sometimes people just show up late. It's like people just show up late in the NFL. You think people show up late for the Chiefs or the Patriots with Belichick and Brady? You think people showing up late with Dan Campbell? You think that shit has flown with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch over the last 5 years? Like, no. And that's why you see the culture in these two teams, but like you get to a law of diminishing returns where you just run out of bodies. And that's where Minnesota, like, I'm starting to think maybe it's just their year. Because if Minnesota wins this game, I don't see a scenario where I probably would bet against them in a playoff game. I really don't. And there's a chance, it sucks for Detroit, but if Detroit loses the game on Sunday and they play the Buccaneers, I mean, Tampa sometimes when they get rolling on offense, like they'll just score at will. I mean, Baker Mayfield I think he's like top 2 or 3 in touchdowns right now. So I don't think that's a great matchup for them. They got Mike Evans. They got some running backs who can play. Baker Mayfield right now has 39 touchdowns. Obviously, he's going to play this week because they need the game. I mean, he's going to end the season with 40-plus touchdowns. Now, Baker will throw interceptions, but just looking at that matchup, like I like that matchup more for Minnesota. I think Minnesota just better on defense, much better chance to go on the road and win that game. If you tell me the Bucks are playing, especially if Detroit loses this game by 7 or 10 points come Sunday, and I'm not trying to talk shit. I love the Lions. I love Dan Campbell. But, like, we got to be realistic about how you win big-time football games. Like, you can't win big-time football games when you can't cover anybody. And Baker Mayfield has 39 touchdowns for a reason. Like, they throw the ball a lot. Like, they're an explosive offense even without Chris Godwin. So, I mean, Mike Evans is a monster. Like, you saw George Kittle tonight. That's Mike Evans. But he can do even more work because he's outside. So, I think the only way Detroit has a chance, not just on Sunday night, but in the playoffs, is like they're going to have games where they force fumbles and get picks because they're just not going to have stops. They're just not going to be able to get stops. And it's no one's fault. It's not bad scheme. It's not a bad coordinator. It's just injuries. So to me, you get a freak force fumble. You get maybe a backwards pass. You get a great play by a defensive back. You saw tonight Purdy just airmail someone. You get a bread basket catch by a DB like Kirby Joseph tonight on his first one. Like, that's got to be your formula. And that's a little random. And it's probably hard to win a couple games like that randomly. But you definitely can win 1, maybe 2. And obviously, Sunday is huge for them because the only one team gets a bye now, which I kind of go back and forth on. Like, the football season's so hard. Like, 2 teams get a bye felt right. But listen, it gives us more games on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday night now with the new playoff schedule.
It's the most wonderful time of year for getting in on all the hoops, football, and hockey action at the DraftKings Sportsbook. It's the season of giving, and we're being gifted college football and basketball, pro football and basketball, and pro hockey too, almost 24/7. So many games every day, so many opportunities to place your first bet. Try betting on something simple, like picking a team to win. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and place your bet. And here's a gift for all new customers. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. When you bet, just $5. Happy holidays from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
And one more thing, and I saw So congrats to the Lions. 14 wins. If they win Sunday, 15 wins. What a fucking season. Belichick brought up today with McAfee. I saw a clip that, the NFL should go to a draft lottery. And I'm like, I'm not opposed. Why do we just give these shitty teams the number one pick or the number two pick? Why don't we just make it random? It doesn't mean like a team that's drafting 20th is going to get the number one pick. But why don't we just give it a percentage chance? So if you're in the top, like the NBA does it, if you're in the top 4 or 5, you have whatever, 17%. And actually, they've lowered it over the years to make it even harder to tank. And it's not because in the NFL, tanking is an issue. It clearly is not. I mean, the 49ers are better off losing these last 2 games, and clearly they're trying to win tonight. But why do we incentivize these shitty, shitty teams? Why do we even, Stephen Ross could offer Brian Flores 100 grand a loss because if he loses, they would have got Joe Burrow, which would have been the right move. But I'm not opposed to the lottery at all. And I'm not, Bill would have a better idea if he's been to a million of these league meetings if they'd even entertain that. Who knows? Doubt they would. I've never heard anyone in the league bring that up. But I think that would be smart. And I'd be all for that because like the same crappy teams, like the Jags are always drafting the top 3 or 4. Like every single year they're there. All the time. All the bad teams are just consistently drafting high. And every once in a while there'll be a new team after a disastrous year. But for the most part, this is the same crappy teams drafting high. Why don't we make it random? It's like, yeah, you might get the 3rd pick or you might get the 12th pick. And that's on you. Be better at football. Run a better football operation. And I hope that happens one day.